And I believe we are seeing live video of the two of you.
Okay. You got his screen already? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Jeremy, my friend, welcome. And
Thank you,
thank you
Doc.
for being here.
My
For
pleasure.
the folks that haven't met him already, Jeremy Knauff, he's become a rather prolific speaker, and he's also a vocal advocate for veterans affairs, veterans of all stripes. In fact, he's become a bit of a kingmaker with his branding and networking skills. More than just a motivational speaker, he actually offers counseling on the how of building someone's reputation. So he's had some rather impressive successes, or I should say, delivered some impressive successes to his clients. And I think he's going to have some interesting stuff to share with us. Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate that. All right. So I know we've got some people on here who know me, and we've probably got some people on here who don't. So I'm going to give a little bit of backstory because I think there's a lot of really important context here in how I got to into doing what I'm doing now. So I had run a digital agency for years, and then a few years ago, I had a health crisis that almost killed me, and we lost everything. I had to rebuild from nothing. And at that time, I'm sitting here basically on my deathbed trying to figure out how the hell I'm going to keep the business afloat, how I'm going to rebuild everything, how I'm going to take care of my family, etc. Let's see. Looks like my clicker is not working. Give me 1 second to see what the hell's going on here. All right, I'll just use the mouse. All right. So as all of this is going on, I've got the challenge of trying to figure out not only how to stay alive, but also to take care of my family and how to rebuild everything. So what I ended up doing was I leveraged a combination of SEO, social media, and traditional media to take myself back from where I was at that point, which was zero, and put myself back on the map. And in doing so, I realized how incredibly powerful that is, and started doing that for clients, started sharing the knowledge on how to do that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to get featured in the media. So let's talk about why we want to get featured in the media in the first place. So for most people, they think that the answer is because they want to get exposure. And that is partially true, but it's not entirely true. The real reason is much deeper than that. And that is we're going to build authority by being featured in the media. And that creates a very different scenario for you. When you're featured in the media, it creates all kinds of opportunities because you are recognized as an authority in your industry. So I want you to think about it like this. Let's say you're sitting there and you all of a sudden start having this crazy pain in your chest. And you start thinking, well, I don't know, maybe I'm having a heart attack. So you get up, you go down to the hospital, or you call the ambulance, you let them drive you to the hospital. And you go in there, you tell the nurse at the front desk what's going on. They put you on a gurney. They start attaching all the EKGs leads to you and haul you in the back. At what point do you think you would say, well, hold on, let's stop, let's negotiate. Like, what are the prices going to be? Let me see your school records. Let me see your credentials. You're not going to do any of that because you're in a position where they are the authority figure in that because of how they are positioned, right? So the same thing happens in business. You look at somebody like,
yeah. I hate to interrupt your flow, Jeremy, but apparently we have, and now it finally just came back. Your slide deck vanished for a moment, and it's back, and we're good. Sorry for the interruption.
All right, all good. All right, so we have that same kind of authority status in the business world. All right, I'm sure everybody here is familiar with all of these people here. Look at somebody like Elon Musk. He has so much authority that his tweets actually change financial markets. Now, obviously, none of us are going to build, most of us are probably not going to build that level of authority. but we can still build a sufficient level of authority that's going to give us a lot of opportunities. All right, so let's talk about what that authority status does for your business. The first thing is it's going to speed up the sales cycle. So when you are a recognized authority, you're the person that somebody knows is the go-to person for solving that particular problem. You've already eliminated a large portion of the typical sales conversation. You don't have to justify who you are and what your background is and what you're capable of, because that's already been done through various other authoritative media sources, right? Let's say you're an expert and they featured you on the news talking about whatever it is that you do. Then that's going to put you in a very different position than all of your other competitors who don't have that. So it completely shortens the sales cycle. It's going to help you close sales a lot faster and a lot easier. It also lets you charge higher prices. So when you're an in-demand expert, you have the ability to pick and choose your clients. So what happens there is you can be very selective about who you want to work with and just raise your prices so that you're only dealing with exactly who you want to deal with. And even when that happens, there's nothing stopping you from, if you want to work with somebody who isn't really at the price point that you're charging, you can still be flexible there. But this just gives you the ability to charge higher prices. And then the other benefit is that it helps you to attract opportunities. So of course, we know that when we're featured in the media, we get that exposure, we get that authority status, the shortening of the sales cycle, like we talked about, being able to charge higher prices, but there's a whole slew of other opportunities that this actually brings to you. So once you start getting featured in the media regularly, then other people in the media will often reach out to you wanting your insights on particular questions, wanting to talk to you about current events in your industry, want to talk to you about how legal or technological changes will affect the industry, things like this. And it just kind of creates this beautiful snowball effect where you get more opportunities, and then that leads to even more opportunities and even more. So it just keeps building upon itself. So let's talk about how you get featured in the media, but more importantly, how to then leverage it to become an authority in your industry. So step one is to demonstrate your expertise. Now, this is an area that most people get it wrong. They get out there and they talk about how awesome they are. They brag about how they're the best. And that's a terrible way to do it. What you want to do is you want to get out here and start by sharing useful, actionable information that somebody can take and use whether they become a client or not. We're going to take that information, that knowledge, we're going to put it up on social media. We're going to put it up on our own blog. We're going to put it up wherever we can, guest blogging on other sites. There's so many places we can put this information. And then we use that basically as our foundation, right? This is going to be the foundation for framing how the media then perceives us. Now, there's a really important factor here, and that is we have to make sure that we're really giving the most useful information possible. Too many people have this mindset that, they have to hold on to this information. They treat it like it's their precious, right? They want to hoard it to themselves because they're afraid that, well, if I give away this information, then my clients aren't going to need me. And frankly, that's bullshit. Because think about how much information you know about what you do. It would be almost impossible to sit down and teach somebody all of that. But beyond that, you also have to realize that things constantly change. Your industry evolves. Legal regulations change. Technology changes. So the information that you have right now may be great today, but it may change tomorrow. So no matter how much you give away, you are always going to be valuable. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat here. In some cases, there are going to be people who are going to purely just take that information and try to implement it themselves. And that's fine, because those people are never going to become your clients anyway. The people who are serious, they just want to know that you're capable, that you know what you're talking about, that you can solve their problem. And by putting out content that demonstrates exactly how to solve the problem, they will know that you're able to do that. And the same applies to the media, right? When we're talking about journalists, producers, anchors, whoever's looking at your content, when they see this, they can tell that you actually know what you're talking about because you are providing in-depth information. You're not just sitting here and trying to be very surface level and sound smart. You're actually giving away all of the information. Now, when we do this, we have to realize that we're probably going to piss some people off. This is just part of the process. You have to be comfortable with knowing that some people aren't going to like you because they're not going to agree with some of the things that you say, or maybe they'll become jealous because you're getting more exposure, you're getting more accolades than they are. This is all just part of the process. Another thing is, when we do this, we have to remember that authenticity is critical. Some people have this misguided mindset that they can just kind of stretch the truth a little bit, they can exaggerate a little bit, and nobody's ever going to know. And then they think that once they get to a certain point, then they can start being completely honest. And that's just never going to work. All right. You're going to get caught at some point. It's just a matter of when. All right. So there's a great example of a guy who I recently found out had completely made up all of his background. And he misrepresented himself in a number of different ways, both professionally and his military service. And what happened was, people in the media found out about this. And literally every single piece of media coverage he had ever earned disappeared overnight. Not only is it all gone, and he now is basically a ghost, the only things that are up there online in any capacity are things that are his own things, his website, his own social media. The bigger problem for him is that there's basically a blacklist within the media, right? So when you make a mistake like that, if you lie about your background, if you lie about what you're capable of, and the media finds out about this, you're going to be talked about, and then you're not going to ever be featured again. So it's critical that we are 100% authentic in anything that we say when we're creating this content, because if not, it's going to bite you in the ass. All right. So now we've got this content, we're sharing useful information, we're putting our knowledge out there for the world to see. The next step is to work your way up the ladder. So a lot of people, they basically will go from having no presence whatsoever, and they'll try to go get featured in Entrepreneur. They'll try to get on national news. And that's generally not going to happen, right? We all want these, what we call tier one outlets, but unless you've got some kind of a track record, you're probably not going to get into any of these right out of the gate. And this is especially true for any kind of television news, because they want to know that you're capable of carrying yourself well on video, that you have good composure, that you can speak clearly and eloquently, and that you can carry on a good conversation with the anchor. So we want to start small and then work our way up. But keep in mind, when you're pitching these entities, that everyone in the media has the same challenge that you do. So all of us are probably creating content pretty regularly, and we know how much effort that takes. Imagine how much content a news entity has to create. They need your content. They need your knowledge, because that's basically the product that they're selling. They're taking your expertise, packaging it around stories, and then wrapping advertising around that. So they need your content. You just have to know how to, first of all, present it and then pitch them properly with it. So it's not a numbers game, though. So I see a lot of people make the mistake of, they will just pitch everyone. We don't want to just be anywhere. And even if we wanted to be just anywhere, they're not going to be interested. We have to make sure that we're getting the right places. All right. It's not a numbers game. It's not sending out spam emails. It's not trying to reach as many people as possible. It's trying to get to the right outlets with the right story at the right time. So we can look at kinds of things that they've covered, and sometimes we can piggyback off. Let's say, for example, a lot of people are familiar with the foreclosure moratorium, which recently ended. When that happened, I had a particular client in that space, and we were able to leverage the hell out of that, because every news organization was talking about it, whether it's print, digital, television. We put this client in all of these outlets because all of these outlets needed content around that particular topic. So we want to make sure that we're getting to the right people. Now, there's a few different ways we can do that. You've got tools like Meltwater, Cision, Muckrack. These are tools that PR professionals use for getting the contact information for reporters, for producers, for anchors, for journalists. They tend to be pretty expensive, so much so that they're generally not even listing prices on the website. But the good news is you don't even need these tools. If you want them, they can be super handy. It's a great way to get contact information of pretty much anyone in the media, and they maintain these databases. So it's pretty much always up to date. But there's some other ways that you can get this information without spending a ton of money, without having a subscription to one of these tools. And the other way is free. That is LinkedIn and Twitter. So this is something I've used a lot to get in touch with all the different kinds of journalists, all different kinds of producers, anchors, editors at various publications. Twitter is used very frequently by journalists, basically anyone in the media. LinkedIn to a lesser degree, but you'll find that you can usually get a hold of pretty much anyone in the media using one of these platforms. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ways you can do this here. If we look at LinkedIn, so we can go up into LinkedIn and do a search for whatever network or outlet you're trying to get featured in, and you can do a quick search. And what we want to do is, if you click on the company up here towards the end of the filter options here, you can put in whatever outlet you're looking for. And that will bring up a list of everybody who has listed in their LinkedIn profile that they work for that outlet. And from there, you can connect with all of these people. Now, I will tell you that a lot of people in the media have a LinkedIn profile, but it's probably 50-50 as to whether or not they actually use it on an active and regular basis. You'll find a lot more activity on Twitter, but this is still a powerful way to do this. So Twitter, let's talk about that one for a minute. So let's say we search for CNN, and we can just kind of scroll through these bios real quick. And the search granularity is a little bit less effective here in Twitter, but it's the same general principle. We can find here a number of, so this guy is a news writer. This one's another international correspondent. Obviously, this is a screenshot, so I can't really scroll. But if you scroll down, you can find a number of other reporters, anchors, producers at CNN. So between these two tools, we have the ability to contact pretty much anyone. And I do want to point out that when it comes to Twitter, most journalists, most anchors, most producers are relatively active on Twitter. Pretty much you'll typically see them several times a day on Twitter. So this is a really good one for you. Something else that you should do is build out a list. So I've got a media list. Right now, I'm currently tracking a particular number of people in the media. And what this does is I now have a fully focused list on just people in the media that I engage with regularly. So this gives you the ability to stay on their radar. You can see exactly what they're posting. You can comment and like their posts. That helps you to kind of build and nurture that relationship. And then in addition to having basically this micro feed of all the media people, you can also click on the individual members and go manually to each of their profiles. Maybe they haven't posted anything in a while. If you want to go manually to their profile, you have that option here as well, without having to scroll through the whole feed. Which then segues into, let's see, here's what it would look like if you actually click on the members portion. Okay, so if we go to this screen here, so this is another way that we stay in touch with people in the media. So basically, we've built out a Google Sheets document, and we track everybody in the media across multiple social media networks. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, everywhere. And the reason we do this is because of how the algorithms work. If you're not engaging with them regularly, you're probably not going to see their content. So let's say you haven't engaged with somebody for a few weeks or maybe a few months. Their posts probably are going to stop coming up in your feed entirely. So this is actually a great way to stay on their radar, go see what they're doing, continue that dialogue. And that dialogue is critical because what happens is when you have a relationship with them, it's very different when you pitch them versus if you're just a stranger who only reaches out every now and then. So I've got a great example of this where a good friend of mine, she's been in PR for longer than I have. She's probably been doing this for, I don't know, 20, 30 years, strictly on the PR side of the world. And I had introduced her to a news anchor a while back, and she pitched that anchor a particular story. It was a great story. It was timely. It was a fit for the network. For all intents and purposes, it was a great opportunity. But the anchor never responded. She sent a few follow-ups. That never went anywhere. And she mentioned it to me. So I said, well, do you want me to mention it to her and see if I can make this happen? She's like, yeah, absolutely. I'd appreciate that. So I reached out to the anchor, this is somebody I talk to at least on a weekly basis. And as soon as I reached out to her, the answer was, yes, let's set it up. So that highlights the importance of taking the time to build these relationships with these people, because when you have that relationship, it's going to increase the likelihood that they actually read your emails and actually respond. Because you have to realize these people are getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails every single day. So in order to cut through all that noise, you're going to have to put in the effort to actually build a relationship there. So there's another way that we can keep track of what they're doing and stay on their radar, and that's using Google News alerts. So I'm sure most of us here are familiar with Google News alerts. What I like to do with these is I will put in a reporter's name or an anchor's name. This doesn't really work as well with producers, but anybody who's actually the face of the content that they're putting out there, this will work great for. So what we do is we'll put in that reporter's name, and then as soon as they post something, I get a Google News alert. I can go out there and be the first person to like and comment on that tweet. That's just further cementing in that relationship. You can set these up for the reporters' names, the anchors' names, but you can also set it up for particular topics and then go look at what reporters are talking about that and engage with them there. So there's a lot of different ways you can use this. What we want to do, though, is we want to set this up so that we receive the notifications immediately. You can either set it up to where it sends them once a day, or it will send them immediately. When it happens immediately, you then have the option to get out there and be the first person to engage with whatever that piece of content is. So maybe you're responding to a post they made. Maybe they posted something about an article. Or maybe you're going into the comments section. I know a lot of sites have eliminated those, but there are still some that have them. Generally, what happens is if somebody posts a comment on a website, the author is notified, even if it's a large news site or a trade publication or whatever. The author of that article typically gets notified whenever there's a comment. So this is another tactic you can use to nurture those relationships with your media contacts. All right, so next we're going to talk about leveraging the media that you've earned. So where I see a lot of people go wrong is they'll get these great features in the media and then they won't do anything with it. And to me, that's kind of insane. You've got this great asset. It's not going to do a lot just sitting out there on its own, but that's what most people do. So we're all probably familiar with Grant Cardone. He's one of the biggest names in real estate. He's, if not a billionaire, he's damn close. And this guy is just all over the place. So a while back when Clubhouse was super hot, we were in a room with Grant Cardone and a few other people. And there was a situation where this lady was pitching him, trying to get him to invest in her business. The way that she explained it, it didn't make sense to him. He didn't see a viable business option in it. But this other guy, a good friend of mine, Trey Taylor, was listening to her and caught something that no one else did. So he says to her, well, hold on. He says, you're doing XYZ, whatever it was, I don't remember. But he said, you're doing XYZ. She said, yes. He said, all right. And in the course of doing that, you're collecting this particular type of data. She said, yeah, I am. He says, okay, what are you doing with that data? Her answer was nothing. He says, okay, so right now you are sitting on a 6-figure stream of revenue that you haven't even tapped into. And that completely changed Grant's perspective, because now it's a far more viable business to him. And they ended up doing some kind of a deal together. I don't remember the exact specifics, but that prompted Grant to say, damn, guys, Trey is the smartest guy in the room. Now, coming from Grant, that's a pretty impressive thing to hear. And that's something that, of course, Trey was super happy about. But we didn't leave it there. We ended up turning this into a thing where Trey can now use this forever. So rather than him just saying, hey, Grant Cardone called me the smartest guy in the room, we actually put it into an article. So now here's a third-party source saying that Grant Cardone says Trey Taylor is the smartest guy in the room. So now when Trey shares this, when Trey talks about this, there's this piece of media that he can use to validate this claim. It's not just some jackass saying something. It's a third-party authoritative source saying that Grant said this. So then from there, Trey started using it all over the place, ended up using it in his bio. He's mentioned it in social media pieces all over the place. There's a lot of different ways that he's used that because it was locked in to the media. It wasn't just a statement that was made. So that's an example of using some of the things that happen in the media. All right, so here's another example. So this was a recent article I wrote for Entrepreneur Magazine. The article in and of itself is a great article, but more importantly, this article can now be repurposed into countless pieces of social media content. So rather than just sharing a link to this article, which will then give you the little featured image and the headline and maybe a description here and there, rather than just sharing that, this could be repurposed in a much more effective way. So let's say you go through this article and you find little pieces. So I highlighted a few things here. There's a number of pieces we can take out of this and then turn this into a number of other social media posts. Now, you wouldn't take this one article and share it like every day with different excerpts, because that would look stupid and repetitive. But as you start to build multiple pieces out there, you're featured in multiple media outlets, in multiple articles, videos, etc. Then you take excerpts from those pieces. You can create typically anywhere from 3 to 12 pieces of content out of a single media feature. And not just taking text excerpts, but you could take, so like say, for example, you could take one of these excerpts. You could take that as the text of a social media post. You could maybe expand on that little aspect of it and share that with the link. You could also take any of these excerpts, turn them into a little graphic with that excerpt on it, maybe a picture of the outlet's logo, maybe a picture of you, some other things like that, and turn this into a powerful graphic element. You could also take and turn this into a video. You could go through here and kind of read the article on a video and turn that into a piece of video content. And then you could even take that piece of video and chop it up into smaller pieces. So all of these pieces that you get featured in the media, you can turn them into multiple pieces of content in multiple different ways, multiple different formats. And then that gives you the ability to continue sharing these, which then further reinforces you and your authority position, because you've got all this content out here and you've just got this fire hose of it constantly flowing. And then there's something else really cool that we can do. We can take all of these pieces and we can use Facebook to put them in front of both our potential clients, our existing clients, and the media. So For potential clients, that's pretty straightforward, right? We're going to use it to try and bring them into our business, right? Bring them on as clients. For existing clients, it's just further reinforcing our value with them. For the media, the idea here is we put this content in front of the media so that when they're looking for an expert on whatever this topic is, then you're going to be the one that they reach out to, right? If they're constantly seeing you being cited in the media, and then they have to produce a piece of content about that topic, who do you think they're going to come to? It's going to be you. They're used to seeing you. They're used to seeing you in the media, and they know that you're an expert who can solve this problem, who can answer any questions they have. So how do we get in front of the media? This is far easier than you realize. We set up custom audiences in Facebook, and we target all of the people who work for all of the major media outlets in the world. And what you can do is, let's say you were featured in Forbes or Entrepreneur, or you were featured on the local news, or you were featured on national news, whatever. You can then take that piece either in and of itself, or with a deeper excerpt, or with, maybe you dig a little bit, expand on some of the things you touched on in there, whatever, however you want to do it, and then run that post as a paid ad to everybody in the media. So what happens there is, now you're getting this in front of them. You're showing them that you're the expert. And in the event that they're going to do a story on you, there's a good chance that they look you up and reach out to you. So that's a dead simple way to do this. Generally, a lot of people aren't targeting the media, so the cost is not all that high. So this is a really good tactic for getting in front of the right people in the media. All right, so that's a wrap. What we've talked about here is how to get featured in the media so you can become the recognized authority in your industry, attract more customers, and charge more money. So that is it.
Some interesting stuff.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions come in, Steve? I see him smiling, but you're muted, Steve. Well, I'm kind of surprised there aren't some questions about that, because I would think that, like, for instance, Haro is something that I have way back in the past. I stopped doing it several years ago, but I used to do quite a lot of responses to Haro until I got to the point where I realized that 90% of the people that were in there were mommy bloggers. They weren't actually journalists.
Yeah.
They were just, they weren't worth my time, and
Great.
I stopped doing it. But that's not entirely fair, because there are still some journalists using Haro. And you talk about building relationships. That's the key to it, isn't it always?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to use Haro, and I've gotten some great coverage from it in the past. But honestly, it's kind of been destroyed by, the unfortunate fact is, by our industry, by the SEO industry.
Yeah.
So, and I can't place that blame entirely on our industry. It's kind of multifaceted, right? Haro used to be great, but now at least half of the queries are anonymous. Well, if I don't know what outlet it's for, it's not worth my time to even bother responding, right? Like, if it's the Wall Street Journal, sure. If it's, Karen's cat blog, probably not. So the fact that so much of it is anonymous outlets now, that they don't tell you unless they actually use your content, then, that's really taken a lot of the value out of it. And then the other side is, there's a tremendous number of people in the black hat world. This is a very little known fact. Tremendous number of people in the black hat world who are sending out bogus queries just to get content that they then take and spin into articles, because it's original content and it's easy to get. So I have not seen a lot of positive impact from Haro in several years. So that's why we stopped using it a while back.
Yeah, I had one positive experience probably 15 years ago. Reached out, and I used to when those things hit my inbox, I jumped on them immediately. And I
Uh-huh.
was like 7 minutes after this guy posted this thing, I sent him a response, and he got to me and did an article, and it was fun, it was interesting. It never panned out for anything, but uh, but that's really the one experience out of probably 100 callbacks that I did. So I just nah. I have dozens of places to waste my time. We did get some
Yeah.
questions in.
All right.
Angie Nikolaichuk says, in the latter portion of the talk, are you giving the media outlets a bit of a ranking and charting a path that are interrelated or follow each other, etc., to move up the ladder, or just sort of picking ones you feel you could best get picked up by?
So, okay, so that's a great question. And it's a combination. So, we're generally going to, if somebody's got no coverage, like for example, when we're handling PR for a client, if somebody has no coverage and we're coming in cold, we're going to go for some smaller outlets. Now, I can get away with things that some other people can't because of the relationships that I have. So sometimes I can get somebody, an entrepreneur, right out of the gate. We had a client not too long ago that had no real press coverage, got them in Forbes, Entrepreneur, um, Yahoo Finance, Fox Business, like just a ridiculous number of tier one outlets. But that was largely due to the relationships I had. If you're coming in cold, you're probably going to have to build some authority in some of the smaller outlets, maybe some of the trade publications, local news, um, even blogs, larger blogs as well. And then from there, once you've kind of got that smaller authority status, then you can start going after some of the tier one outlets or the larger trade pubs or things like that. Does that answer your question?
Sounded to me like it probably would have. I could understand your logic there. It's like you say, it's going to be a mix. It depends.
Yeah. And the
We've
other
got a
thing to think about,
question. Go ahead.
I want to add one thing to that, Doc. Um, a lot of times you're going to pitch, and for whatever reason it doesn't happen. Keep in mind that that's not a no forever. That's a not right now, because these anchors, producers, journalists, whatever, they have a ton of content to produce, but they're also beholden to people above them. So they have to produce content within a certain range, where they have to have certain things that has to get produced. So you could have the best story in the world. You could be the most qualified person to talk about it, and the story still may not fly. But if you use the tactics we talked about earlier to nurture that relationship, then you can keep following up and continue pitching that particular idea. And when it's a better fit, it could go.
I'd even offer something to expand on that a little bit. These guys are typically these journalists are typically in a bit of a time crunch to find some information, a timely piece to cover a particular story. The person that got there 30 seconds before your call may be half as qualified, but their effort is done. They don't have to toss that out the window. Maybe they recognize the fact that you're more qualified, and they may file a mental note. I want to keep this guy in my Rolodex for next time around. But
Mm-hmm.
the bottom line is they've got other things to do, and this job, if good enough is good enough, that job is done. Thank you very much for your call. Maybe we'll talk again someday.
Yep, absolutely.
We got another question from Tracy Ingram. He says, "Have any reporters caught you targeting them?"
Um, I can't say that anyone's ever said anything about that. I mean, the reality is it's just a sponsored ad. So I don't think anyone's going to really give it that much thought. And even if they did, there's nothing nefarious about it. There's nothing dishonest about it. It's just,
Fair play.
you're just putting this content out there. They happen to see it in their feed. So no, I've never had anybody say anything about it, whether they noticed that it was, an ad, maybe not. I don't know. As far as whether they notice the targeting, I don't know. I know there is a tool for Facebook ads where you can go and see, for example, all the Facebook ads a company has ever run. I don't remember how much information that shares, if it actually shares what the targeting is. But I don't think anybody would care either way, because what you're doing is you're just putting out information. The journalists tend to be overworked as it is. So I'm pretty sure they're not digging too deep into why my ads happen to appear somewhere.
Probably not. Well, interesting session, Jeremy.
Thank you.
And we appreciate the time and effort and you making yourself available to us and sharing this stuff.
My pleasure.